Before we start with the show, we'd like to introduce you to Swisspreneurs' main partner, Qumram Business, the digital all-in-one solution for small businesses. Whether it be marketing, sales, customer care, or accounting, Qumram is just what the doctor ordered. Any SME employee can tell you that managing internal processes manually and on paper is just about the silliest way of wasting your time. That's why Qumram digitizes everything. An easier, hassle-free workflow means you and your company get to spend time on what really matters, your core business. Go to qumram.ch to find out how your business administration can be simpler, faster, and more efficient. And now, on with the show.
I like to solve problems, right? I love complex problems. Bring them on.
Welcome to the Swisspreneur Show, a podcast about startup stories and hands-on learnings from experienced entrepreneurs. Here's your host, Sylvan.
Simon, very well welcome to the Swisspreneur Show. It's a pleasure to have you here today.
Thanks for having me, Sylvan.
Today we're going to talk about your story, your entrepreneurial career. You are a successful founder, you are a board member and also an investor nowadays. And I would like to start off with your personal background because you studied and you have a master's in mathematics, physics, and also sociology. And that's like not the typical entrepreneurial background. So in what way has that background helped you to become an entrepreneur later?
It's a good question because I really picked my studies totally, independent of what I would want to do. I wanted to study originally information technology, but as I was working in information technology already, it was kind of too theoretical then. And so I said, well, if I do the real, let's go for the real thing, right? But if we're going for theory, then let's take the hard one. And so I switched to mathematics. I never really worked in any of these disciplines, but still, I guess, the school in math, that you have a problem and you just want to solve a very hard problem and to try to figure out how do you get from a position A to solve this big hairy problem. And how do you attack that? How do you analyze a problem? How do you see what options you have? This was kind of a school of thinking that helped a lot in all my endeavors. So I could use, more than the math itself, I could use this kind of approaching a problem, right? And physics, it's always good to know about physics, which is kind of the base of nature. But this was really just out of interest. I just wanted to know how our world works. And for that, kind of physics is the foundation. And sociology then was the total complement on, let's do something that has nothing to do with logics. And to be really frank, we had 0 girls in mathematics and physics, 0, which kind of trained me. So I needed to be somewhere where it's not just guys around. So I picked sociology, which of course helps a lot as well, because you learn to understand how do things work, how do societies work, how to deal. It's very close to psychology if you want. And this of course helps in negotiation or dealing with people.
Absolutely. Sounds like a very interesting package. And also when reading through your LinkedIn reviews that people gave to you and also talking to your peers, they say that you're incredibly good at explaining a very complex topic in a simple manner. And I think that's probably the result of the 3 different studies to really be able to break it down and make it easier to understand.
Yeah, it certainly is. It certainly is, because I had to move in very different contexts. But I guess it's also a little bit based on how I earned my living, because I was working during all my studies and paid my living myself. And what I did was actually I did computer courses. So I taught people in how to learn Excel and Word and SAP. Got help. Although I typically knew less about SAP than anybody in my course, but however, Windows operating systems and all these kind of things. And there I think I needed to kind of learn on how to deal with a very different audience, different ages, different backgrounds, and how to, explain something that was not obvious to them. So this kind of getting into their shoes and seeing, hey, where does this guy start? And what does this mean if I want to actually explain something and not take as a given that everybody has had the same experience as you had? This was also a very interesting school for me, yeah.
And I'm sure also a helpful skill for your job and role as a CTO and board member at Unique. You spent 7 years at the company. And if you look at Unique and also our previous interview guests like Marcus Ackermus, for example, there's sort of this Unique mafia where several startup companies and also investors sort of emerged from that company.
Yeah.
So what happened there at Unique that you got this DNA and really many people chose the path of entrepreneurship after leaving the company? What did Unique do differently that this was even possible to have so many entrepreneurs and investors emerging out of that?
It's a very, very good question. And I think it's really not easy to answer. And maybe I can pick three possible reasons. One, of course, but probably every company will say that. We really had an excellent bunch of people. So we were super lucky in picking extremely talented youngsters with a lot of potential, which then, of course, also developed their capabilities. And then when they left, Unique wanted to do something else. I also think, though, that, and that's something I can recommend to everybody that starts a career, I think that the service business just teaches you a lot of things, So when I think back, we had to do all these projects and all the customers wanted to know, how much does that cost? How long does it take? So you had to always be very aware. What do you do? How do you focus? Where do you not focus on? Where is it really important to be precise because they were pissed if it didn't work, right? Yeah. But where can you maybe cut a few corners because it's not that core? How can you stay within a budget and a timeline? How do you do that? How do you even evaluate that things? And this gives you a lot of capabilities that as an entrepreneur are fundamental. While if you were working maybe all the time just in corporates or product companies, it may be kind of different that you're just, working on something without having these permanent constraints on. You just need to deliver then. And I think this was, at least for me, it helped massively to being able to actually say, okay, let's tackle something because I know how to do that. I know how to do projects. So I started the product as I did with a project. I thought about what do I need to do it? What people do I need? How do I get it done? How costly will it be? And then we launched it. And third reason, I guess, I think we had a good culture in Unique to empower people, which meant that they were always involved in the processes that relied on estimating things, taking responsibility for their project. It was not we as partners sold the project and then they just had to deliver, but they were involved from the beginning, which gave them kind of this entrepreneurial background, into their very daily behavior, right? And I think that's maybe also a reason. They were already little entrepreneurs within the service company and just, got to become great entrepreneurs afterwards.
But I can imagine that having this entrepreneurial spirit in a larger company that is not your own company directly, that is something that is incredibly difficult to achieve. Because many people, many companies, they want to have that culture, but very few actually achieve it.
Yeah, it definitely is hard to achieve. But I think it also, size matters a bit. So as long as it's not too big of a company, you still can have this kind of entrepreneurial spirit. Otherwise, every time that the company maybe goes above 100 people or so, it starts to become really tricky. And I guess you can also see that many of these people that then turned into entrepreneurs, they were already there at early times, right? Where it's kind of really hard to keep these mechanisms alive as soon as you grow.
And then later on, you actually took the leap and became an entrepreneur yourself. You became founder and CEO of Milgram Media, an internet venture incubator. And you also were a senior consultant before that. So what led you to take the leap and to actually, plunge into entrepreneurship yourself?
A good friend of mine, Heiner, which was also the CEO of Unique, we had frequent discussions. He was a smoker, so he needed smoking breaks, and we were standing outside having some chats. And so once he said, you know what, this service business is okay and it's cool and we're working on interesting projects, but don't you have the feeling that you would want to work on something with a real business model? Meaning something that doesn't just scale with people, right? And this was kind of a starting point for a thinking process of, I really would want to do that. And we even tried it within Unique, but it just kind of didn't work out because it was too much of a services company, and a product company just it's a different DNA, if you want. And ultimately, this was the main reason why I said, I want to try to build a product now. I have done services now for 7 years. It was great. I learned a lot, but next thing for me is I want to create a product that can scale. And then I created a consulting company, which makes total sense.
You're still selling your hours, right?
Yeah. I mean, the consulting company really was to just, earn my living, right? So I never worked a lot there. It was always just, I picked the projects in a way that I always had spare time. And during the spare time, we then started to elaborate. We first wanted to build a health platform. I supported a friend of mine on building his product company and so on. And then ultimately, the first venture we went into was then actually Milgram Media.
And how did that happen then? I mean, what was the different business model that really made it attractive to you?
Well, we wanted to tackle a problem that we had found to be predominant in big corporations. Meetings are a mess. They're badly prepared. They're hard to organize. There's no minutes and so on and so forth. And we wanted to tackle that problem. That's also the claim was mastering meeting madness, right? And so we found, that's a great product. We knew that this problem exists, and we wanted to build a SaaS platform for big corporates to actually tackle exactly that problem, right? And have the right tooling around this meeting complex to actually make them way more efficient, easy to handle, with automatic minutes and these kind of things. We just did, I guess one major mistake when doing Milgram Media, because we launched it actually as a B2C company. We thought, everybody knows Doodle, of course, that Mike Neff built, right. Super successful. And we always thought, Doodle is great, but it misses this kind of integration into the business tools. I would want to see all the dates that I picked also in my calendar to know I shouldn't, and then automatically get information, the meeting invite as soon as it's confirmed. So we thought we'd just build the better Doodle, and then automatically people will use it, right? Viral effect. Let's go big. And as soon as we have millions of users, then we basically create as an add-on the B2B function, and then we're already in all these companies and we can start to sell it. This was the plan. Just didn't work.
Sounds like a very good plan in theory, right? You think easy, yes. We know what we do, and let's just execute and we'll get there in no time.
Yeah. As many plans, it was excellent in theory.
Sure. But then what happened in reality?
What happened in reality, several things. One thing was really a little bit unfortunate from a timing perspective, because when we started, Doodle also started to create integrations. And as, of course, they had kind of a massive user base, our main USP against Doodle was kind of gone. We could still say, we have the nicer calendar and our Exchange integration is better, but it's not like we have integration, they don't. So this went off. And the second big problem was that we just didn't do it right. We had a pain that we felt, and we did the classical startup mistake, of not doing enough user research. And it was just not a real pain. And people are very reluctant to change. So you have to be massively better, such that they switch from a tool that they know and use and like. And so they just didn't switch. We just didn't get traction, finally. That was the main problem. And it was really that we were so convinced of typical startup first-timer. We were so convinced of our own idea that we thought everybody will love it, but nobody did. And we just didn't do enough research. So there was not a clear enough value proposition. There was not a clear enough need. And that's why we ultimately failed.
And how did you actually accept that sort of failure? How did that show? Did you shut down the company, or what did you decide to do?
Yeah, we would have to, actually, we basically ran out of money. We did the switch to B2B because we also understood that on a B2C market, where obviously the viral model is not working. And we were very, very close to get a big deal with a Swiss company and a magnitude of close to 500,000, which would have been a great entry point and start for the B2B part of the business. But then, well, they switched. There was a restructuring. Our go-to guy was not in this position anymore, so it kind of went down the drain. And this was the last nail in our coffin. And so, yeah, we decided to sell it, mostly because we didn't want to have the effort of ramping it down. But it was really, yeah. It was like a warm lunch with my wife, more or less. I always say it was the most expensive. It was my personal MBA, and I understood that I'm probably not the B2C guy, right?
Yeah, but I mean, that's a fair learning. And
yeah.
You obviously, applied the learnings from that case to your next company, to Qumram that you founded in 2009.
Yeah.
And my question is, before we talk about Qumram in more detail, why did you not decide to stop your entrepreneurial career and say, this is just not for me, this is too difficult, I go back and be an employed consultant probably somewhere and stop doing my own company? Why did you say, no, I continue, this is really the right way for me? What gave you that confidence to continue?
Well, first of all, it was fun. So I was never the guy that liked if anybody tells me what to do. So that's already coming from my parents, which was he was a carpenter. My father is a carpenter. But he also has his own business, right? It was a small business, but he had his own business. And this kind of DNA, these genes, I had them as well. I didn't want to work for somebody else. And then probably I was just, I'm too much of a narcissist to admit failure. So I said, no. Can't be true that I'm not capable of doing a product company. Has to be possible. Let's do it again. So I wouldn't just want to, I knew that, failure in startups is common. Most startups won't succeed. That's well known. So we tried, we failed, we learned a lot. And I just said, no, that's not it. Let's do it again. Let's do it better. Let's do it differently. And I still had this idea of creating a product. I wanted to create a product, period.
And then you did with Qumram.
Then we did, yeah.
Just to name quickly what you did, I looked it up. So it's a fully compliant audit trail where you record every digital interaction securely and transparently for global regulatory requirements.
Sounds good.
Sounds also a bit theoretical. So maybe, to give our listeners a better feel about what was the exact product that you so desperately wanted to build.
Well, the exact product that I so desperately wanted to build. However, so what was the product that we built? When we were built already at unique times, when we were doing all these e-commerce, e-trading and so on platforms, we also started at the same time starting doing enterprise content management projects where there was a lot about archival and compliance. And we noticed there's just kind of nothing that connects these worlds, right? And so the underlying rationale was, well, the business is going more and more digital, but everything that deals with compliance, they still think world is documents. So how do we breach that? How bridge that? How can we combine or link these two worlds? This was kind of the underlying question. And the reason why I started this very product was that still while at Unique, this was one of the ideas I had on a product to create. And I created some early prototypes and some conceptual work. And later on, a client from Unique actually had this requirement. So it was not that, Milgram Media ended and then I was like in my bed or in the shower and thinking, what could I do next, Simon? It was more of just Jürg Truniger, which then also worked with us in Qumram. Just entered the team right after Matthias and myself. He called me and said, hey, Simon, "Hey, didn't you think about this kind of compliance thingy for web channels?" And I say, "Yeah, I did quite a while ago, but let me look up the materials." And I send him a copy. And he said, customer of ours, Suba, which was then our first Qumram customer, has this exact problem. Are you interested to talk to them? And that's what we did. We went there, I showed my ideas, and they said, yeah, that sounds like a good approach. Let's do it. And so I just, slipped kind of into that project. And luckily, from the beginning, I said, hey, if we do that, I want to make it as a product. And Suva is just our first customer. Even if we build it for them, it needs to be decoupled. And we already negotiated to keep the IP and all that thing. And so this was then kind of this long starting point. And then we had a product and we had at least one customer that's interested in. And that's how we started.
Nice. And that's also completely way of approaching the validation, as you mentioned before. Now you have a market pull because the client is approaching you and saying, hey, we have this problem, this is significant, we want to solve it, and not you saying this is the best idea ever. The market needs it, and then nobody actually signs up.
Absolutely. Yes, this was a first market validation, which doesn't mean that there are 120 other customers as well, but still. And there we really were sure that, compliance was also because of the 2007 crisis. Regulatory requirements were tightening. Obviously, digital business went up, and we knew that sooner or later, somebody needs to tackle that problem.
So talking about good timing, regulations like tightening up and having a digital solution ready, perfect timing.
Yeah, we were really lucky. So it was, this was a lucky shot, and interestingly, you said, the product you wanted to build. Mm-hmm. And I think it never really was the product I wanted to build. I never was into compliance for financial services company. If you would have asked me 2 years ago, is this the topic? You get up every morning and you say, that's what I want to do. Then I would have said, no, of course not. And so, and this also stayed like that. We had a product and it was technically challenging and very interesting. We had a team, and let's say the challenge of building a company with a great team, having a product, going international and planning an exit, which we did from the beginning, was what really motivated me and less the topic. So in that sense, I'm maybe not, I'm not actually what you should do as an entrepreneur, being totally passionate about what you build. That's not what we did. So in that sense, we actually started totally wrong from the very beginning.
But that's very interesting, because often you say that, you need to have this personal motivation, this passion for the problem that you solve, in order to also stick through the hard times.
Yeah.
How do you manage that? Because I'm sure that you also had difficult times where motivation was an issue. And if you're not motivated about the product or the solution that you're building, what kept you going in these moments?
Yeah, it's a good question. We definitely have the hard moments. I think what kept me going was, several things. One was that with time, the problem started to attract me more, just simply for the fact that I knew more about it. And it's like with everything. If you gain some expertise in something, it starts to become more interesting. So this was one part. Second part was, as I said, the problem was technically challenging. And this was always something that I like to solve problems, right? I love complex problems. Bring them on. And so I wanted to find a solution for these kind of technical problems. And this was, of course, something that motivated me. And third part was certainly team. We had a real cool team. I liked working with these people. And if I had kind of maybe mini depression or was not too motivated, one thing that kept me going was just saying, I don't want to disappoint these cool people I'm working for, which many of them were friends. And finally, I guess it was still, I absolutely wanted to turn this company into a success, because it was not necessarily what I was totally passionate about from a content perspective, right? From a product perspective. I said, if I don't make this company a success, then I wasted my time in something that's maybe not my core interest. That's not going to happen. And that kept me going.
Yeah. What was that motivation? Of course, you want to have a successful company and also prove that to yourself that you're capable of doing that. But what were the other motivational factors? Was it also to create an exit and earn a lot of money, or what was like the driver behind it?
One aspect that I already mentioned is I wanted to just prove that I'm able to build a product company.
Right.
So, and another aspect definitely also was money, right? I always had this idea that I would want to have the freedom of not necessarily needing to work to decide really out of my heart what I wanted to do. And it was kind of a trade-off, that we decided, I see the opportunity of doing this topic where maybe I'm not totally passionate about, but I'm passionate about building the company, yes, but not the product. Earning a money to then having the freedom of really focusing just on things that I would want to. And this certainly was also motivation. That's why we wanted to have an exit from the beginning.
So let's also quickly talk about your co-founder, Matthias. Mm-hmm. You already worked together at Unique, but can you tell us a bit more about, how you then found each other and actually decided to start the company together? Because being co-workers and then starting a new company together, that's like two different pairs of shoes.
Yeah, it is. It's just that, Matthias, I don't remember exactly what year he entered Unique, but he quickly became also one of the cornerstones because he started to basically take over the project management team and structure the project management process. So we had, of course, a lot of touch points. We were working a lot together and we were working well together. We are very complementary. And that's something we already learned quite early. So it just worked. It was just a good fit. And during that period, he still lived in Zurich, but, worked in Bern. And so he needed a place to stay. And I had space. So he often just, stayed with us overnight. And we very quickly became good friends. And so it was then a personal relationship that we have that was actually the core of the future businesses. We already did Denkplatz together, the consulting company. He left Unique more or less at the same time. We had a big living community in Zurich. So we were 5 guys in a huge apartment in Zurich where he was kind of the first, the one that actually rented the apartment.
Nice.
Others then came up. So we were really, or we still are, very, very good friends. And we just knew we work well together. We have competencies that balance each other's pros and cons.
Great. And I think then you also created sort of a master plan on a napkin that you told me about in our prep call. So then you basically said, okay, we want to, create a successful company together.
Yeah.
How and what was the master plan that you created on that napkin? Well, the famous napkin.
Master plan is maybe a little bit a big word for what it was, but it was kind of, also for Matthias, it was not that he said, I want to spend, working in compliance for financial institution until I'm retired. So also for him, it was an interesting venture to do, but with an exit goal. And so we sat together, we took a napkin and we wrote down, how long do we want to make this? And, how do we want to do an exit? And how much should we earn with that company? These were kind of the 3 key figures. And I, totally lost that napkin. He still kept it. And when we finally were able to sell our company and did a successful exit, he called me and said, hey, Simon, I found that napkin. Guess what? We are pretty much in line. So actually, it took 2 years longer, but we also got like 30% more than we wanted. And so it was kind of unbelievable. When he showed it to me, the picture that he took from this napkin, I said, hey, unbelievable. We kind of precisely hit that target. Yeah.
Wow. And now I'm really curious to hear more about how you actually hit that target. So as we know, with every startup company, there are many obstacles along the way. We already talked about, the market validation. Then you had your first client, Suva.
Yeah.
But I can imagine with your specific product, acquiring new clients, especially also big ticket clients, as it was in your case, that's like super tricky and also takes a lot of time to get a decision. How do you go about that and then, expanding from your first client to more clients and actually grow the company? How do you handle that challenge?
Well, with a lot of work. How do we handle that challenge? I mean, in the end, it's it was classical B2B sales. Every sales pitch was a real project, right? I mean, we needed to go for big tickets because otherwise we couldn't just, have the effort. So it was clear from the beginning, we cannot do $30,000 deals. It wouldn't pay out. And so we really went for the big corporates. We just did a classical, enter there, build a network and start to dig and dig and dig and dig, do a POC here and there until you actually get to the big project. So I think there's no silver bullet in that. We didn't do anything special than classical B2B sales. It was hard in the sense that it took a long time. Compliance was always involved. These are guys that do a lot of rules and regulations in a company, but they typically are not buyers. So they just enforce others to buy, which they don't like to, because in the end, they just need to do something that doesn't necessarily create business value. And so that, of course, took a lot of convincing, and we also needed then in the end to add more components to provide business value to actually convince our customers. Yeah. And one more point, maybe, what we've seen pretty early is that we needed to go international, because if we have, if you are in a niche market and you only want to sell big tickets, you run pretty quick out of targets. Even though, of course, financial industries is big in Switzerland, it was pretty clear that we need to go abroad. Germany was difficult because of privacy, so we didn't manage to get a foothold there. And so we went to UK and US, which was super expensive, but in the end, successful. Yeah.
How do you handle that challenge? Because going international with a Swiss company early on to just finance that's a big challenge that you had to solve on your own.
Yeah, it is. So not entirely on our own. That's when Patrick Barnett actually entered the game. When we decided to go international, we brought him into the company because with his OpTex background, he just had a lot of connections into US market. He knew how to sell in US market. And he really also helped us massively streamline the story, make it big, which helped a lot with investors, because we did several investment rounds to get there. And I think without him, we wouldn't have managed to get A, to US, certainly not, and B, the valuations that we got, which basically helped us to raise enough money without diluting the company. And these were major points to get it done. So I think without external funding, we wouldn't have managed to go to US.
True. You also mentioned the big tickets that you sell. Although this seems to be attractive, it can also be a huge risk, because if you have a client that is probably converting to a paying client, but maybe not, your company faces a huge risk.
Yeah.
I think you have been in a situation where you were almost celebrating like crazy because there were great deals coming in through the pipeline, but then things turn out differently.
Yeah.
Can you talk a bit more about that challenge?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it's exactly as you say. I mean, big tickets is great if you win them.
Yeah.
But it was a total up and down, because every time you lose one, it's like, shit, we really thought we'll get that guy and we don't. So what do we do next? And the situation you mentioned was actually near end of the year. I think it was 2014, where we really had 3 big projects at hand, and they were really close, so close to being closed, but just so close. I mean, the ink was literally dripping. We had it all prepared, and the overall volume was more than a yearly revenue, right? Wow. So this was massive for us. We said, hey, for the first time in our company history, we'll have a run rate of more than 12 months. We just have, next year's revenue is already there. And finally, I can buy a decent Christmas present for my wife, which then unfortunately didn't happen. And all of these 3 deals just literally vanished. And for various reasons, one was really that in one company, they just changed priorities. And so they said, yeah, we'll do it, but we'll now reprioritize it. It will just come later. So it wasn't going to happen. It then actually didn't come. Another was doing a restructuring process. So the guy that actually was responsible for our deal was gone. And the new one first wanted to understand what are all these projects that the other guy had. Well, what do we do with them? Do we really need them? So this was gone as well. Right. And in the third case, they had a crisis which didn't have anything to do with us, but because of that, lost some money. And in the end, they said, hey, we have to halt everything because we first need to tackle that problem. And so literally within a few weeks, we just lost the year's revenue, done. And we're kind of, okay, if we don't find any cash, we're going bankrupt by end of February. And this was, and these ups and downs, they were really tough. And, where you think that was especially hard for my family, I think, because sometimes I was at home totally energetic, euphoric, and I own the world. And next day I was like, oh no, everything is going. No, we're just drive to the next wall. So these ups and downs were really hard to cope with. Yeah.
How did you pick yourself up by losing 3 deals, and what did you do then to actually not go bankrupt with the company? How did you manage this tough situation?
We really had to do an emergency funding round.
Okay.
Luckily we had some friends that were willing to send some money. And so we did just a small investment round just to go over, because we had still a few projects in the pipeline. Luckily, we were able to close these then so that we could actually secure the ongoing business. And so, but we really needed a 400K funding round to just get over a few months.
Right. Yeah, these are the startup reality, the challenges that you face as an entrepreneur. At the same time, every startup also faces opponents and supporters. I would like to talk and continue sort of with the challenges and talk about the opponents first. So obviously you also had competitors in that scape, in the same industry, basically.
Yeah.
How do you handle your competition? Because some of them, they probably offered more features than you or had a bigger team, raised more funding, probably. So how did you go about them and manage the competition?
Yeah, I mean, luckily we had on our product, not too many competitors, because it still was a niche product. So there were a lot of session recording tools which had way better analytics than we had when it comes to UX and these kind of things. But they were not able to deal with the compliance requirements. How do you really store that stuff, that it can be retrieved in compliant formats, and so on and so forth, access rules, masking, GDPR compliance. And so there we had definitely an advantage. And we were in a niche. But one thing that hit us hard was Glassbox, they were called by then. They were kind of a spin-off of the guys that originally created TLeaf. And they really had still have very good analytics on the UX side of things. And then they just saw that compliance is a topic, and they kind of started to copy what we had on the webpage. So they claimed we can do the same. And it was hard for us to prove that they can't, right? And their main argument was that, we are not only doing the compliance part, but we're also providing value to the business with the UX part. So you can do both with one tool, and you don't want to have 2 session recording tools, which is absolutely true. And so we then lost a few deals, one big one with a bedding company that really hurt because of that, because they were able to sell more features, even though some of aspects that they sold were not working, but the customer would just find out later.
Sure.
To cope with that, I think we needed then to build a certain amount of features into the product as well that are, creating business value, which makes it easier to sell as a combined sell. We didn't need to be the best there, but just good enough to keep us in the loop, that people to get to a POC where we can then properly evaluate what's going on. And the other thing is certainly that we also, we were just in different markets, right? So we didn't see them everywhere. And so there was also a little bit of a split, that they were very strong in UK. They were not really strong in continental Europe. We've seen it in the US, but this market is so big, you don't see them everywhere.
Right.
So it was also kind of a geographic strategy on how to deal with that competitor.
So you basically continued to find and serve your niche, basically.
Yes.
Makes sense.
Absolutely.
Let's also look at the supporter side. You have very prominent investors like Ariel Lüdi, also a former Swisspreneur interview guest, that invested in your company, or also Investiere, that support you along the process. In what way have these investors helped you to really build a successful company?
In many ways. Of course, they were coaches. And often if you're in your day-to-day operations, you know, you don't know. You're just too focused on something. Yeah, to actually see the forest, you just see your trees. And there, of course, it was super helpful to have these kind of coaches to challenge some topics, to help refocus, to help say, hey, are you really doing the right things? Help us, you know, eliminating things that are unnecessary. And of course, they have a huge network. True. So this was something that helped us massively throughout all our times as entrepreneurs. Luckily, we were not 20 when starting the company, so we already had a lot of connections into financial services, as we did a lot of projects with Unique there. And so all of this, you know, people within our network, of course, helped us massively to get into corporates, to start a deal, to pitch a deal. And this was extremely helpful.
And that's also basically what you built over the 7 years at Unique, where you built your own network that you could now also leverage for your own company, basically. And I think that's an incredibly valuable setup that you had there.
Absolutely. I mean, that's one more reason to, you know, spend some time in a service company and get this experience. If you're in so many customer projects, and I've been involved in most bigger projects anyway as a CTO, so you just get to know a lot of people and cultures and how they work and what they do, and understand a little bit how you have to pitch them. And this was super helpful. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. At the recent days, like before you sold your company, you had about 35 to 40 employees. You had offices in Barcelona, Zurich, and also San Francisco. And your 20 to 25 customers in Switzerland, which doesn't sound like a lot, but you know, looking at the ticket size, it actually is quite a lot. And you also just put yourself on the US map by winning the first 2 clients in the US. And that's also the thing that eventually put you on the map of Dynatrace, the company that then acquired you. So now, of course, we want to hear more about how this whole selling process of the acquisition of Qumram by Dynatrace actually happened. Can you talk more about that, how that went down?
I mean, Dynatrace by that time, they were actively looking for a company. I mean, Dynatrace is a fantastic software stack. It's amazing what they can do with if something goes wrong with this root cause analysis that you have. But what they were kind of missing is what has happened on the client side. So they were not really seeing what did the user do, how was an error maybe presented to the user, what happened then, could he continue or not, what did he enter in forms that it actually passed. So kind of the session replay stack was missing. And so they were starting to search for session replay companies. And it was actually Patrick that was in US that met then Artie, one guy from Dynatrace, which was responsible of actually scouting companies. It was a total pure coincidence, right? They were together at a congress, and Artie just came to our stand. And he only did that because we were in US. So he just learned about us because we had customers in US. I think without us going to US, we probably would never have met Dynatrace. And so he just walked over, started to talk to Patrick and said, hey, you know, I heard you do session replay technologies. Patrick had his fantastic sales pitch. and then he was hooked. And so they invited us to Linz. And I was first skeptical. I thought, what, Dynatrace, what? What were you doing? Why the heck would they be interested in our technology? Do we really want to go there? Patrick said, yeah, come on, it's important. I said, okay, let's fly there. And so we went to Linz. Well, I don't know if he took the train or flew. It doesn't matter. Met the CDO, chief architect, entire really high up team. And they were just asking what we do and everything. And in the end of the meeting, the CDO came to us and said, guys, I want to be honest, we want to buy you. I was like, okay.
Did you expect that in the first meeting?
No way. No.
Okay.
It actually, before we went there, we did a proof of concept for them, which was remote. And the proof of concept was that we had to record the Dynatrace application, which was a massive, complex UI in the sense of how much they display and all with, and SVG stuff, everything animated. So it was really a hard thing to do for a session replay tool. Obviously, only 2 of the 28 tools that they tested were able to properly do it. And one of them was us.
Nice.
I think the other one was Full Story, not totally sure. But they just did a big investment round before. And so they were just too expensive, I guess. And so that's not something we knew by then, obviously. But seemingly we already were the favorite when we entered there. And now for me, it was just, get to know each other. And by then, when they were talking to us, they didn't disclose that they're in an active, process of searching for such a company. We thought it will be kind of a strategic partnership. In what sense? That's also why it kind of didn't make sense to me. I didn't know how this should work.
Right.
And then in the first meeting, it turned differently. And we knew that it's a different ballgame we're talking about.
I know that you always wanted to sell the company,
Yeah.
that the exit was your goal from day one, basically.
Yeah.
But still, at a certain point, when things get real, how do you make such a decision if you really want to sell or not? Is it just the price, or what other factors play a role there?
Price, of course, is an important factor, obviously. I think there were several other factors that actually played a role. By the time that we met Dynatrace, some people in our team already thought, hey, we need to change something, because what we have seen is that as we needed to sell big tickets and we were a niche player, we actually should have gone global, and not just US, but maybe other financial hubs. And if you have to build that up on your own, it's just massively expensive. And so we thought it would be a good idea to actually, bring the technology to somebody that already has this network. So they were thinking on how can we manage to get there. There was also, this was one aspect. So it was not totally out of the blue on one hand. And on the other hand, we of course wanted to pick a company that meets certain criteria, because we had a developer team, and the developer team was used to work on a startup culture. So for me, it was clear that it needs to be somebody that has a good working culture. It needs to be somebody that has similar values than we have. Of course, we wanted to be sure that they take over our team, right? Even also the location. Luckily, Barcelona was a super good match for them, which was also one of the reasons. So I think I would not have sold my company probably to IBM, because I would just know that this would not have been a safe haven for my developers. We really were family. And so it needed, money was one part, but the other one, it just needed to fit. It needed to be a place where I wanted to work as well, right? So, because I knew there will be an earnout, so I will work for this company as well. I don't want to work for a company that I don't like.
True. Makes sense. One other important part that you mentioned before is that another competitor basically was too expensive because they raised too much money.
That was just a hypothesis. I don't really know whether
but
this is the
it
case.
sounds pretty plausible.
Yeah.
And in what way, how did you do that strategically to always have enough money in the tank to survive, but also not taking on too much money that you get too expensive if somebody wants to buy and you cannot really deliver a return to your investors? Were these like strategic decisions and thoughts that you had, or it just sort of happened that way?
Nah, honestly, I think I would be bluffing if I'd say it was a strategic decision. No, we were really, we were cash driven, right? So we just had our plans. Where do we want to go? We want to go to US. We also wanted to create a new product, the social media governance product. And so we had some funding needs. And then we were trying to just balance, what's the valuation that we can get. How much dilution are we ready to accept? How long does it take us? And out of this triangle, that's how we actually shape the investment rounds. But it kind of, strategic thinking of, if we do that, maybe we are too expensive no, we didn't do that.
And of course, one question that is interesting for everybody listening to the podcast is, for how much money did he actually sell to?
Well. That's something I can't disclose. We actually agreed with the buyer to not disclose these terms. But I mean, what I can disclose, as I mentioned, it was 30% more than we actually wanted to get when we were drawing our napkins. And it's enough to give me a lot of freedom to choose what I want to do next.
Okay. So we are curious to see what that will be. One last question on the M&A part. Was there anybody that supported you along the process? Because I know, M&A processes, they take a lot of energy, a lot of time to actually, execute, and you never know if it will work out in the end or not. You still have a business to run. You still have clients to serve in parallel. Did you have any help from the outside to manage and support you along the process?
Yeah, definitely. We would not have been able to manage the process ourselves as we were building a new project. We had a lot of projects going, a new product. We had the existing product. And then also 2017 literally was hell for me when it comes to workload.
I can imagine, yeah.
And we were all rookies in that process. So we simply got the best M&A guy that you can on the Swiss market if you're a startup or a small medium enterprise, which is Heiner Grüter, another one of the Unique bunch. We worked together as a CEO. He was a CEO of Unique while I was a CTO. We worked together closely. And when he left Unique, he actually created a consulting company and very quickly specialized in mergers and acquisitions. And so he was our one-man show that drove us through the process. And this was massively helpful. We would certainly not have managed to close the deal without him, at least not for these conditions.
Yeah, we've also had the pleasure of working with him. And for me, it's clear you don't want to have him on the opposite side of the table.
No,
you want to make sure that he's part of your team.
Absolutely. After that, I mean, there were situations on the phone because he told me once, Simon, if you want to, it doesn't matter what the other guy thinks. If you want to get through your terms, you just have to repeat things 23 times. And I was like, okay, Heiner. And then we were on the phone and the other guy came and said, no, but this is too expensive. And then Heiner, let me tell it one more time. It's like this. Damn. Yeah, but we could maybe possibly. Let me repeat it. And I had to really literally take off my I couldn't keep my cell phone on my ear because I just suffered so much.
Right.
But in the end, he came through with his conditions. So
nice.
He was, it was super successful there. Yeah.
Team up with the best in the business,
yeah,
I would say.
That's what you have to do.
And one very interesting thing is then afterwards, you mentioned the earnout. So you were staying at Dynatrace and worked for the company. Mm-hmm. And then the company eventually did an IPO in the USA. Yeah. How did you go through that process? Because that's also a very interesting development to be part of, I can imagine.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we totally didn't expect that. For me, working as a corporate was easier than I had thought of. Because Dynatrace had a culture which was, giving us a lot of freedom. Most of all, because I was the only guy in Barcelona. We could not do what we want, but we had a lot of freedom to creep our culture, our processes, the way of working. We just had a clear goal. We needed to integrate the software and starting to sell up and then also build some UX analytics tools, which we did. But, so for me, getting into the corporate world was a relatively easy process just because Dynatrace is a relatively easy company to work with. Of course, I still got gray hair about some administrative and HR stuff, but
part of the game, I guess.
And the IPO, to be frank, I didn't expect that. So we knew just because of the history of Dynatrace and because of Thoma Bravo being an investor, that certainly eventually Thoma Bravo will want to do something with the company, either sell it or make an IPO. But I was not in the inner circle involved of knowing about when this will happen, how it will happen, what will happen. We just heard, of course, you always hear rumors if you're connected a little bit within a company, and we saw strange things going on and people that we worked with getting super busy. So we knew something is in the bush. But in the end, it was a surprise for me as well. But it was an interesting process then to get through and see what is needed, due diligences that happen there as well. What changes in a culture if you're going public, that suddenly things get more formal. You have to report more. Things that were very natural before suddenly needs tooling. So it was more that what happened after the IPO that felt different, right?
In what way?
I mean, before, Dynatrace was a super transparent company. We knew everything about all the numbers, what is selling what, how is things going, how much do we earn, all the decisions that were going on. We had a lot of freedom. We didn't need to report hours and so on and so forth. So it was a private equity company, and we basically decided what to do. And after the IPO, things got much more closed because they're just, because of inside deals and so on, you cannot disclose these things. And so for us, I felt much less kind of close to the core of the company. And there were not a lot of more requirements on what do you need to report, what to do, which gave it a different feeling, right?
That's an interesting observation, because taking a company public is actually also, you have to disclose so much more information than as a private company.
Yeah.
But it's interesting to hear that from the inside, the things turn completely differently to what you would probably expect from the outside.
Yeah. I mean, we could then also access the information as soon as it was disclosed publicly, but this is also after the fact. So typically before, we had the information at our fingertips, and we could use it to change our business, to control our business and change decisions, take decisions. And then suddenly this kind of information was gone. And that was kind of hard.
Right. And I can imagine also on the personal level, the IPO probably also made you happy for a second time, because most often you get paid in cash, but also in shares to a certain degree, right?
Yeah, that's true. And we also had an earnout model with Dynatrace shares, which were so-called MIUs, management incentive units, on the private equity company. And when we went into that deal, we didn't know if and when eventually these would be tradable. And so while still being in my earnout, I got then commonly tradable stock, which is of course a good thing. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. We had a good tapas party in Barcelona then.
I can imagine. So a double payoff, basically.
Double payoff if you want. Yeah.
Could be worse. So I think we covered the story from your early days of the different studies that you did until the exit and the IPO. To conclude this episode, we would like to hear more about your resources and gadgets. So are there any additional resources like newsletters, blogs, books, also gadgets that you can recommend to our listeners?
Well, yeah, of course. So books. Let's start with books. Currently, I'm really getting into the topic of nutrition, exercise, and all these kind of things. And there are just a few things that I love. So something that I can recommend to everybody is the 12-minute workout. A fantastic book about high-intensity training. The Calorie Myth is a fantastic book about, eating habits and changing eating habits. Why we sleep. Oh, well, I could go on with books for Ians and Deans. Thinking Fast and Slow from Qumram. There's so many good books. But maybe let's stop here. Technical gadgets. Not really. What I can recommend is more, life hacks, maybe.
Sure.
So what I did in recent times, and that I can recommend to anybody, is really ramp up high intensity training, which has a massive impact on my body and well-being, which I do with Qumram. They are here in Zurich, 2 locations, and also in Zug and St. Gallen. Super recommendable. First 2 trainings are free anyway, so try it out. I love to just train 20 minutes a week, and that's all I have to do, and it just has a massive impact on my body.
Then you need to recover for the rest of the week.
Yes, it's so beautiful. For the first time in my life, I don't have a bad conscience about, I have to do more. No, Simon, relax. Just take it easy. And the second thing I did, which is also life-changing kind of, is that I met with Thorsten Albers. He's a nutrition expert. So he actually is a doctor and focuses on nutrition. And me and my wife and I, we did a test with him. So 2 blood tests with, glucagon load. And then he gave us really, and we also reported on the behavior, and he gave us recommendations about how to change our eating habits, which, well, when I started, I lost like 6 kilos in just 2 months without anything that's close to being hungry or so. So it's fascinating. And these 2 things have completely changed my physical shape within the last year. So this is something that fascinates me and really makes me hungry for more of these kind of life hacks.
Awesome. And I'm sure that we're going to tackle this topic in the second episode together, where we talk about your time after the exit. And I'm sure that there are many, many topics that we can cover there. Simon, thank you so much for the great stories, for the insights. It was a pleasure talking to you, and we are very excited for the second episode.
Thank you, Silvan. It was a pleasure being here. Thanks for having me. And yeah, totally looking forward to have the second episode with you.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, you can support us by rating our show on Apple Podcasts. This way, we can reach an ever-growing number of aspiring entrepreneurs.